Crop death, Crop death, Crop death, Crop deaths, though. The people who get most concerned about crop deaths are the ones who enjoy eating animal flesh the most.
As of today, the Garland Farms video, The Vegan Kill Cult, has garnered over 22,000 views. Not too bad for a video published by a very small channel with less than 3,000 subscribers. As a result, not a day goes by where I don't receive a notification from YouTube telling me that another misanthropic vegan has left the same old, tired, false comment regarding
crop deaths, though!
Crop deaths, though. It always goes something along the lines of,
"You do understand that if we all went vegan, we would need to produce less plants. Most of it goes to livestock. Ask yourself, do you need more plants to feed a cow or a human? If anything, you just explained why we should be vegan."
And one thing we do have to consider at this point is that the majority of plant food grown on Earth is grown to feed animals in the animal agriculture industries, not humans.
People who eat meat, cheese, milk, and eggs are obtaining these products from animals who were fed plants. They ain't living on air, these animals. What do you think these pigs, chickens, cows, farmed fish are eating? They're eating plants. The vast majority of cropland is grown to feed the animals you eat. So any crop death, any pesticide harm, any predator shooting, any of that.
there's just one huge problem with their theory. There is vastly more crops grown specifically for humans than for livestock, and I will prove it in spades. Fact: the U.S. grows approximately 2 million acres of oats, 6 million acres of sorghum, 13 million acres of fruits and vegetables, 85 million acres of soybeans, and 95 million acres of corn. We don't feed much oats or sorghum to livestock anymore, and obviously we don't feed fruits and vegetables to livestock at all. So the two main culprits in regard to livestock feed is corn and soybeans. While only a small percentage of the national corn crop is directly used for food for Americans, much of that for high fructose corn syrup, a whopping 40% is used to produce ethanol. And while the vegan cult would have you believe that cows are sentient beings that drive ethanol-fueled automobiles, ethanol is, in fact, produced solely for human consumption. The ethanol refining process does produce mountains of waste called distillers' grains, which is fed to industrial-raised livestock. However, this waste is a byproduct of ethanol production and would not exist without the production of ethanol. Only 36% of all corn in the U.S. is fed directly to livestock, while 64% goes directly to human consumption. This brings us to soybeans. Virtually all soybeans are produced primarily for the oil because the oil brings back the highest profit margins by far. Once the soybean oil has been extracted from the soybeans, the fibrous waste or byproduct that's left over is called soybean meal. And this fibrous waste is then fed to industrially raised livestock. A 60-pound bushel of soybeans yields 11 pounds of soybean oil, 48 pounds of soybean meal, and 1 pound of toxic hexane-contaminated inedible processing waste. Wait a minute, you say. Soybean meal, the part that's fed to livestock, that's a byproduct? Okay, what's a byproduct? Well, a byproduct is defined as an incidental or secondary product made in the manufacture or synthesis of something else. A secondary result. Unintended but inevitably produced in doing or producing something else. To get a better understanding of what a byproduct is, we only need to look closer at one of the many destructive things that makes a vegan lifestyle possible. You see, vegans overwhelmingly reject the use of livestock manure in the production of their plants.
Vegans shouldn't buy organic products because organic is not vegan.
The organic thing, that is something that you can choose to avoid. I'd avoid most organic produce because they do use a heavy reliance on manure. Not only is that just potentially dangerous because it's literal shit, but you are indirectly making it easier for the meat industry to be profitable. So for that reason, I'd say avoid organic.
If organic products are fertilised by manure, then there is obviously a buy-in to the animal farming industry.
Now, you realize that this rejection of the natural nutrient cycle makes the vegan lifestyle entirely dependent upon the petroleum industry, potash mining, and phosphate mining. Take, for instance, phosphate mining. Phosphate mining is required to grow plant foods where those involved in plant agriculture have rejected the use of natural livestock manure as fertilizer. The objective of phosphate mining is to procure phosphorus. However, in order to obtain a little bit of phosphorus, gargantuan amounts of minerals must be excavated, which produces mountains of dangerous and destructive byproduct called radioactive phosphogypsum. So, looking back at soybean production, we know that the soybean oil is the gold of the soybean because it's got the highest profit margin by far. And what's left over after the highly prized oil is extracted is called soybean meal and is considered a waste or byproduct of soybean oil extraction. The approximate revenue generated by processed soybeans is as follows. 40 cents per pound of hexane extracted soybean oil and 14 cents per pound of soybean meal. So it's obvious why the primary objective when processing soybeans is undeniably to extract the oil, because it generates approximately 3 times the profit per unit of weight than the byproduct, the soybean meal. Again, it's important to note, almost 100% of the soybean oil in every soybean goes directly to human consumption. However, although the oil that is extracted from the soybean is the primary driving factor in soybean production, every soybean is only 18% oil and 80% byproduct by weight. In other words, much like the mined phosphorus that makes the destructive vegan lifestyle possible, soybean oil production produces mountains of waste or byproduct. Now, believe it or not, after that clear explanation, I still get confronted by misanthropic vegans who ask, surely by those calculations, about 60% of the value of the soybean is actually in the byproduct. This is an attempt to shuck responsibility. So let me make this clear beyond reproach. Another unnecessary evil of the vegan lifestyle, due to their disdain for the use of natural livestock manure and the natural nutrient cycles, is phosphate mining, which comes with gargantuan radioactive mountains of waste or byproduct called radioactive phosphogypsum stacks. Now, because of immoral and unethical business practices, much like we see in the soybean industry, the phosphate mining industry has manipulated the EPA to start allowing them to incorporate this radioactive waste into the material used for road and highway production. So now, what was a mountain of useless, toxic waste or byproduct becomes a source of great profit for the corrupt phosphate mining industry. This does not change the fact that the primary purpose of phosphate mining is and will always be to extract phosphorus to support a plant-based diet, much like the fact that the effort to obtain toxic hexane-leached soybean oil will always be the primary purpose for growing and processing soybeans. On a side note, since the soybean oil is designated almost 100% for human consumption, and as such brings back the highest profit margin, GMO soybean makers are constantly trying to find ways to increase the oil content of every soybean. You need to know that we are not easily able to extract the soybean oil for human consumption. In fact, extracting the most profitable element, the soybean oil, requires bathing the soybeans after an energy-intensive crushing process in a petroleum product called hexane. Not only is hexane a byproduct of a finite and earth-destroying petroleum industry, hexane is a neurotoxin that can do severe damage to any animal's nervous system that comes in contact with it. Extracting soybean oil not only is a dead-end road due to petroleum reliance, but the extracted soybean oil itself is playing hell with human health. Not only is it a primary driver for obesity and diabetes, it's also doing real damage to the brains of people who consume it. Now as for the byproduct that's left over after hexane extraction of the harmful oils. The so-called soybean meal is composed of fiber and particular proteins. Now, we know that the fiber comprises the lion's share of that bulk and is indigestible to humans, but the proteins themselves, as the science of botany has proven, are harmful to human health because, like all plant proteins, they are part of the soy plant's defense against predation, which is one reason, among others, why feedlot beef has to be pumped full of antibiotics. It's important to note that these soy proteins are not a significant portion of the natural diet of cattle, or the diet of any other ruminant for that matter. The primary protein source for cattle naturally comes from the bacteria farm that bovine animals have in their rumen. You see, the first 3 chambers of a cow's stomach is a bacteria farm, where microorganisms are cultivated for digestion, and the 4th and final chamber of the cow's stomach, the abomasum.
Now the bugs play a very important role in all this fermentation, but they play equally or perhaps even greater importance in the fact that they themselves become food for the cow.
The food now becomes concentrated and is sent into the 4th chamber, the abomasum. This chamber is considered as the true stomach, as the glands in abomasum secrete acid. This acid kills bacteria.
The condensed digester passes to the abomasum, the final chamber of the stomach. The abomasum, which is the proper stomach, secretes enzymes to initiate the digestion of proteins released from plant cells, and also proteins of bacteria and ciliates found in the rumen.
When you feed a dairy cow, you're truly feeding a fermentation vat full of microbes.
The abomasum is like the human stomach. It's a hydrochloric acid chamber. And anytime we find a hydrochloric acid chamber in a mammal's digestive tract, we know that this chamber is designed for the digestion of proteins and fats into amino acids and fatty acids, which bacteria and other rumen population microorganisms are made of. Unfortunately, today, regenerative livestock farmers are the minority, but that is because the industrial model is being propped up and supported by gargantuan subsidies that are enabling and encouraging the unhealthy and destructive industrial cattle market by providing a subsidized or cheap soybean byproduct or waste made possible by damaging subsidies and the petroleum-driven extraction process.
Largest soybean growing region, but it's not getting a warm welcome from everybody. Lancaster, York, and Berks counties rank as the top 3 soybean growing counties, in the state. However, a group of concerned residents nearby here in Lancaster County are worried about this new plant because of hexane emissions. The chemical is used to extract oil from soybeans. They say it's going to add pollution to an area that already has air pollution issues.
Despite unsubstantiated vegan, petroleum, and pharmaceutical claims to the contrary, we know that the climate change that we're experiencing is desertification. And that desertification is being driven by the tillage associated primarily with corn and soybean agriculture. 300 years ago, the North American continent, for instance, was topped with some of the most carbon-rich, healthy, and fertile soil mankind has ever witnessed.
The soil, Marcus, black like my wife's hair.
We know for a fact that this soil was created by massive herds of bison, antelope, deer, and other roaming ungulates that moved around the continent like giant amoebas, pulling carbon from the air and depositing it in the soil. So it's not the cow, but the how. We need to abolish the harmful and unfair subsidies that are driving the industrial corn and soybean industries, and that will disincentivize processed food manufacturers from putting the harmful soybean oil in everything, while automatically creating an incentive for all animal agriculture to move back to the natural regenerative model that we're going to have to return to if we're going to survive as a species. Please bookmark and share this video everywhere you see the vegan lie that more crops are grown for livestock than for humans. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And thanks for watching.